Brioche is a wonderfully buttery cross between bread and pastry, and it's perfect for breakfast, brunch, and even as dessert. I'll start by showing you the basics, a classic French brioche recipe. Then I'll advance the use of brioche by making a tarte tropézienne, a sugar-crusted brioche filled with vanilla pastry cream. After that, you'll be ready to take on the challenge of a decadent chocolate hazelnut brioche cake. And for a little something extra, I'll use brioche to make an assortment of tea sandwiches. Let's start with that basic French brioche recipe. So it is a combination of bread and pastry. It's so buttery and rich, but it does start with yeast, a tablespoon of it. To get yeast activated, it needs a liquid. In this case, I'm going to start with a 1/4 cup of milk. I warm the milk up, but I've cooled it down a little bit until it's just above body temperature, and that's very important when working with yeast. To that, I'll add 2 tablespoons of flour. So adding this little bit of flour starts the yeast activating. And immediately, you see bubbles start to form. While this sits for a minute, I'm going to get the dry ingredients ready. 1.5 cups more of all-purpose flour, and I'll sift in 2 tablespoons of icing sugar. The sugar itself really gives the yeast something to feed on, making the brioche so light and fluffy in texture. And just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I'll just stir that together. And let's take a look at this paste. See how it's thickened up already? And you can actually smell the yeast. The smell of baking bread has to be one of my favorite food smells. 2 more tablespoons of milk. And I'll also add 2 eggs. And to this, I'll add 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter at room temperature. And this really adds the richness. Unlike traditional white bread dough, you don't have to knead this for terribly long. You just have to make sure the butter is incorporated. Before I do anything with it, it needs time to rest and to rise. And I'll put this soft brioche dough in the bottom of the bowl that's just been lightly oiled. Cover it up. At this point, you want to let the dough sit out for 30 minutes. In that environment, the yeast comes to life. After that, it gets chilled for 8 to 24 hours. That slows the fermentation down, but also develops a beautiful flavor. And I have one that has sat for almost 24 hours. It's ready to roll and shake. Because of its chilling time, you do want to prepare this a day ahead of when you'd like to serve it. The minute you start handling the dough, you're crushing out all the air, but that's okay. That's going to challenge the yeast, bring it back to life, and again, develop another depth of flavor to it. Shape it into a log and cut that into 6 pieces. I'm going to make 6 brioche in their classic shape. What it takes is a rolling motion with your hands. So you're sort of twirling the dough around. This is the simplest way to roll and shape a brioche. But if you've ever been into a bakery that serves the classic French-style brioche, you see it has a little knob on top of it. So there's a little trick to creating that shape. Using the heel of your hand, you shape your ball of dough into almost a snowman shape, like so. Then create a donut. You push the little part through the larger one. And since we're doing the classic brioche, we might as well bake it in the classic brioche tin, this beautiful fluted tin. This measures 4 inches across, and the recipe I've made fits 6 beautifully. I remember learning this technique when I was in cooking school, thinking it was the strangest thing, but when you see the final baked result, you understand this little effort. And the tins are lightly greased. So it takes another 90 minutes for the brioche to rise up again and warm up. Then they'll be ready for the oven. So I'll just cover this with a tea towel, and I have a full recipe that's already sat for that 90 minutes, and see how it fills out the pan. The finishing touch for a classic brioche is a brushing of egg wash. The egg wash is simply a whole egg whisked with 2 tablespoons of water. And these are ready for the oven. I've preheated it to 350 and they take 25 minutes. Oh, you can smell the butter as these bake. Absolutely beautiful. Now what you need to do is let them sit for 10 to 15 minutes, just to let the tins cool a little. Then it's important that you turn them out of the tins, because if you let them cool completely in the tin, you'll get condensation, and that makes for a soggy crust. Right now, the outside of the brioche is crispy, golden, and then when you tear inside, you see that buttery richness. Oh, it smells so good. A little strawberry jam, and you are all set for breakfast. Now that you've seen how to make brioche dough and bake it in its simplest form, we can move up a level and I'll share a recipe for tarte tropézienne. This is brioche with a vanilla pastry cream filling.